I do have questions, but I would rather that you ask them. So we have a microphone available. Who would like to kick us off? Okay, I'm going to start. Oh, okay. There's a gentleman near the front here. Sorry to point. And if you could let us know who you are, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Andrew Aitken from Lanner Group. The last speaker mentioned that there were great similarities between computer integrated manufacturing and 4.0. I reflect those views. I just wonder whether or not some of the same barriers to success that existed then still exist now, both in terms of a global perspective, but maybe from a UK cultural perspective as well, in terms of perhaps the difference with which industry is regarded at a national level. Because I see in Germany it's much more easy to run a business having been a manufacturing engineer than it is in the UK.
Well, Jens, we'll kick off with you since you're London-based but German-born.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer the cultural question. It's a little bit thin ice here, but actually, I think you have companies in the UK who are front end and totally do exactly what companies do in Germany. So I think there's no difference. I mean, and it's not to try to sneak out here. I'm only here for 6 years. I'm still trying to find out honestly what it is that the UK, being the factory of the world, has moved away. And I have to say, when I came, I actually started in Birmingham, yeah, and I'm an engineer, and my first company was called Management Engineers, and people thought we are repairing the heating system, yeah. So there's also a difference what an engineer actually is in Germany and probably here, and I think it's a little bit exaggerated, but in London everybody wants to be investment banker. So. And I can't blame the people because they earn a lot of money. But I don't know where this thing got lost. So maybe I have to hand over to my British colleagues to explain where the cultural thing comes in. Sorry.
So would anyone like to comment on the British way that we view industry and engineering?
I'd certainly recognise that engineering isn't held in the same kind of stead as it is on the continent. I mean, certainly in Germany, but equally, say, France, Italy, Spain, and even maybe the US. I think it's actually an opportunity for us now because there is a lot of excitement around the tech sector, reinvigorating the public perception of engineering and manufacturing. So the technology that's coming in now is perhaps more exciting to the new generation coming through. I mean, there is a challenge. It's not a direct answer to the question. But a challenge around the kind of demographic we've got in the manufacturing domain currently. So a lot of the knowledge and skills base is a kind of older demographic moving perhaps towards the end of the working life, and we've got a bit of a gap in the middle perhaps where we didn't invest in the skills, and partly that's linked, I think, to this kind of cultural issue of the attraction of manufacturing and engineering for a few decades. But now the kind of skill base we've got coming through are very digital literate, perhaps not got the fundamental manufacturing engineering skills, but I think there is a chance to address that by coupling the digital world and the manufacturing world to try and rebalance. So it did get lost somewhere. I think there's a chance to try and bring things back on track and attract the next generation into manufacturing.
Any other comment?
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, the problem starts at a very young age, and the emphasis that we have in education on different things, not on making things, but on describing things or whatever, and that goes all the way through. So that needs to be fixed. It's got to be fixed also for all groups of people. I mentioned the diversity challenge. I think the other thing is that we've got to do a better job of describing what making things is all about these days, making it more exciting, because it had a rep in the UK of things that decline. Well, actually, as you've heard, UK manufacturing is doing pretty well, even if it's doing well in smaller and different areas. And I do think the combination of digital and making things especially if you spread it away from perhaps the factory to things like biotech and other areas like that, really could be the start of a change of mind. And some signposts need to happen, and then we've all got to do a better job of describing how exciting it is. Look what financial services did. They attracted the brightest and the best. They got exactly the same types of people that we need in Industry 4.0, and we could do it.
Thank you. Any other questions? There's a question near the back.
Hello, Joseph Hayek, Volassel, Norway. I have a question especially for Mr. Nackmayr. From your experience and perspective of a consultant, if you will persuade a CEO or CTO of a company that they have to go towards Industry 4.0, basically most of them are financial guys which are concentrated on return on investment. Secondly, they don't understand the concept because a lot of them think you put a lot of Wi-Fi sensors and then you are 4.0 labeled, and that's it. So how can you change the structure? Because you mentioned it's not about the people on the shop floor, it's vertically. And how can you change it if you have top management which thinks that it's about the sensorics? How can you do that?
I mean, you kind of answered the question yourself. I think the only way is you have to start from the top. And you see now that, I mean, for example, Airbus, they brought in a very, let's say, somebody from outside as a new CTO. I mean, still too early to say was that then the great success, but I think one possibility is to bring in somebody with this kind of mindset, because it's very difficult to do it from, we as consultants can't do it because nobody would listen to us as well. So I think the only way is you have to bring in somebody into the top management to drive this. Otherwise, it will not happen. Does that answer your question, or?
Yes.
Guillaume, do you have a perspective?
Yeah, I think it relies on the value you can bring to the company. So, because we do, as selling software, we sometimes do consulting job for our customers. And so you have to adapt your conclusion to the people you talk to, right? So if you talk to financial officer, you talk about value. Where do you bring value? How much WIP will you gain? How much cash you will have if you put more tension in the pool flow, right? And so this means you have an idea of the best business practice. You know what you can expect, from leveraging those technologies in making the value better. And so, again, I don't like the idea of I need to be Industry 4.0, certified, because it doesn't mean anything. I need to run a better business. This is the question you need to ask, and then things slow down.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have a slightly out there simulation question. One of the things I've been hearing about is how some companies are asking their employees to wear sensors, and not in some cases it's just to monitor their movements, say like Amazon delivery drivers, but in some cases it's to measure their blood pressure and get a sense of their emotional state, their well-being. So for example, in finance, high stress, big decisions being made, they're trying to detect when their staff may not be in the right state to do that. So you've talked about very rich simulations. To what extent are we thinking in terms of monitoring the human beings down to the point of emotion and state of mind, as well as physical movements? Is that on the agenda yet?
To be honest, not on mine yet, but I mean it's an interesting question. I mean, I would always say there are probably good reasons to do that, but I work also a lot in Germany, or you always have the unions immediately saying, okay, this is personal data, so it's a tricky one. I think we will see more probably personal data that is related to value creation, value-added processes. But I think it unfortunately, it very quickly runs into this kind of, is it personal data, it has to be protected, what are we doing with the data? So, but to be honest, I haven't done a project on that yet, so maybe somebody else.
There are areas where for very, life-saving type activities, for example, driving trains, where there has been experiment, normally when you drive a train, you have to say that you are alive, every once in a while, which is about every 30 seconds or something. And so they have been trying to automate that and to try to have sensors on the body so that you can make sure that the guys or the woman driving the train is well aware, etc. So we see that in very specific area. But for the moment, most of the time, it's just a question of being able to clock the time, know whether the person had a difficulty somewhere versus the model always.
Right.
And indeed, in some cases, some of those regulations you were mentioning Germany, and there is the same thing in Italy, where it's very difficult to get personal data. So, okay, personal data for monitoring people is complicated, and I can understand that, but monitoring data to make sure that the process is going well, and so in some cases, yes, but not to the extent to where you were going.
Any other comments?
I think, sorry Sam, were you going to say? This is the direction of travel, so augmented, whatever you want to call it, reality, intelligence, cognitive approaches to things are going to be possible, and therefore they will be probable at some point. And for that to work successfully, though, to deal with the issues that you've raised, you have to go back to that point I was making about customer and partner data, is why are you doing this, and what's the benefit to the person that you're doing it for, or to the other people involved. So the train driver example is a great example. But I think there'll be more and more of this kind of thing, because working with machines will become more integral to what we do, and it will help people succeed.
Yeah. I think there's maybe a start of a movement to monitor health and well-being of staff, not directly going to the fitness for decision making, but genuinely recognising that health and well-being of staff has an impact on productivity and performance.
Right.
So there's quite a head and a heart aspect to that, and that's perhaps starting. I could see that evolving over time into something more, seeing the health state of an individual being key parameters around the health of a process. Maybe that's a space a bit into the future, I think. In the manufacturing domain, there's still a bit of a challenge around automation and Industry 3, which perhaps isn't finished yet in certain parts of the UK, and the feeling that automation is going to displace jobs, it's a threat, it's a barrier. All the technology we're seeing, in fact, that we're working on it across the Catapult network, is as much as automation is actually assisted automation. So looking at the kind of AR, VR, cobotics, so looking at how you're adding value and changing slightly the role of the human in the loop. So more creative roles or dexterous roles, and automating the tasks that make it more robust or improve productivity overall. So kind of the coexistence of humans and automated technology in the factory environment quite important. So I think actually if there was any kind of inkling of moving towards monitoring human health and fitness for the job and decision making, that could be quite damaging, because there's still some barriers to overcome, I think, in recognising the value that the technology brings to the workplace in the first place.
Right.
I think if you look at science fiction and so on, the idea of a tech buddy, something customised to you that actually makes you a better operator, makes you more successful. I don't think these things are far-fetched. I think they can come.
We heard from Bosch this morning that there's a workplace that knows what language is your natural language, adjusts its height automatically, so it's the beginnings of that.
And you can build don't forget, all these things are starting to learn now, and so you can learn together, you can build a relationship. It's not so far away.
Well, the technology is certainly there. It's a matter of when and how you choose to use it, I think.
And the industrial relations that go with it.
Look what people do with Siri and Cortana.
Yeah, true. Thank you. Question in the middle here.
My name's Emma. I'm from Knowledge Associates. You talked about some of the challenges with skills in education. What are your thoughts on apprenticeships?
Apprenticeships. Who would like to start?
I mean, again, in Germany, it's a very, very common thing. And I think it's one of the success factors, actually. I think it's very important. And is a good way to introduce people to the real world and working in a real environment. So I can only encourage industry to do it. I mean, we do it. We do obviously internships and yeah, it's hard work sometimes, but it also it definitely has a benefit. So I think, I don't know how good the system really works in the UK, but I know in Germany it's a big successful story.
And how about France?
France have a tough story with apprenticeship. So there is a history. It was very strong. Then in the recent years it went down a little bit. But I think for the manufacturing jobs, this remains something very critical. I mean, we were talking about cobots. We were talking about focusing the people on the task at which they're the best, which means that somehow the control of the motion and the knowledge of the motion, right, remains totally critical. And this you only learn by doing, and you learn by doing early. So I think that for the future of our activities, for sure, apprenticeship needs to rise.
I believe they're crucial. I think there's a gap. I mean, certainly I'd see Germany probably seen as the exemplar, with a continued kind of respect and investment in skills in engineering and manufacturing. We've had a couple of decades of neglect, I think. Most of the engineers I've worked with who've come through an apprenticeship background are outstanding engineers. It creates a whole great rounded individuals. I think there's a bit of a renaissance in apprenticeship starting again. I think that it's crucial to build the skill set that we need. Whilst we're talking about digital skills versus traditional manufacturing skills, it's a great chance to bring them together. So you've got to understand the processes and the materials and the hardware that you're working with, as well as the digital technology interfaces that we're going to work with in the future. And some of the kind of anecdotal evidence I pick up working with SMEs who are re-engaged with apprenticeship schemes and talking about digital technology as well. It's always the apprentices who are most comfortable and first go and want to start programming the robot or playing with the AR or the data analytics, and the guys who perhaps know the company and the process inside out, who traditionally held the knowledge and expertise, are a bit more reluctant. So it's quite a good way of bridging that gap as well, and bringing in people who are tech savvy, keen to learn about the fundamental manufacturing discipline, and bring on the digital tools as well. So it's crucial, and I think we're starting again. We need to scale it up.
I would say about time. I mean, we should never have abandoned them. It's a model that addresses a number of things that industry keeps complaining about. People being work ready. How do you make them work ready? We'll bring them into the workplace. Focusing on the right skills and changing that view of young people as to how to get on, what things they need to do. However, it does need to be done well, and we've had a track record in the past of apprenticeships being done from the supplier of the apprenticeship qualification as opposed to industry. So, business needs to get hold of this and run it. Our government needs to do what it's done, which is to make it necessary and inevitable. But if we don't run it and own it, then it will be another missed opportunity.
Thank you. Others? Question in the middle at the back.
Gash Buller, tech company. Sorry, I couldn't resist asking a second question. We see a lot of the technology. We saw the sort of Dassault systems. We see really interesting technologies, but it's that implementation that we seem to have a problem with in terms of getting it into the workplace. How do we sort of bridge that chasm? Because technically everybody should have the sort of systems that we've been talking about, but why don't they? There must be a really simple reason or a difficult reason, but how can we close that gap between implementation and looking at what we've got as technology?
Right. In the unfortunate project that goes wrong, the problem is not the technology. The problem is usually the acceptation of change by the company. Because at the end of the day, you don't duplicate your practice going digital. You change your practice. This is a change. okay? And people need to work differently and forget about their old habit. And if you don't have a visionary CEO or CTO, whomever is managing the transformation, that is ready to be convinced that it provides value and go beyond those roadblocks which relates to change management, only in those cases can you succeed. If you're not ready to push a little bit and to forcefully go and walk that road, you may be blocked. But it's never, I mean, to my knowledge, to my experience, I've never seen project fail because of technology. I mean, we can always fix it. That's not the point. So change.
I think part of the solution is showing, if there's two failure modes here. One is trying and failing, and the other one is not trying at all, despite the technology being out there. And I think an important starting point is kind of showcasing examples of where technology has been used successfully. I mentioned earlier the reason we showed that app at the end was trying to pick out examples. There's some great examples around the UK of uptake of digital technology and success stories, and showing people where that's working. A bit of peer-to-peer sharing can be really powerful. And then maybe I would say this, but the Catapult network, we're there to try and be a safe place to come and play and explore that technology, mature it before you make the transition into your own facilities. And there's other technology providers can do the same sort of thing. So there's places to go and play and explore safely. And a bit of signposting to say, here's a successful installation, here's a successful use of the technology, here's why it worked, and here's why we invested. So I think a bit of sharing and communication is an important part of it, as well as the cultural aspect when you start to try and implement technology.
I'd like to add up something. I talked about change. This is a business change. This is not an IT change. Whatever revolution we're talking about is not for IT. I mean, it's good for IT because it keeps them busy, but actually this is for the business, right? So the business has to lead that, not IT, business.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add? Or
Yeah, I mean, my one thing or UK or outside UK. I mean, in the UK specifically, we heard this morning, and we had the same numbers, that there's a productivity gap around between 20 and 30%. Yeah, so I think one issue here in the UK is to really implement what we call the basics. We saw it in several slides. The basic is lean manufacturing. I still see many companies here who haven't implemented lean. So how can you go to the next level when you haven't done your homework and you still don't have a proper clean factory? So I think there's a real gap between companies who struggle to catch up with the rest of the world, and there are companies who are playing in the World League, Champions League, and they can now move to the next level. And then I agree, sometimes it's better to take something outside, test it, and then bring it back in. And then you have the whole trouble with change management, because people don't like to change. But especially in the UK, and I pay my tax here, so I want this country to be successful. And this may be cultural again, but there's a huge thing to catch up, is the whole understanding of what a modern factory looks like. And it's clean and visual management, simple, all the good stuff we implemented 20 years ago.
I would certainly, add to that. Take a look at experience in other industries that have digitized already, because I think there are a lot of read acrosses. And starting point is very much, don't conceive a project like this, as a transformation through using technology, because that's an absolute recipe for failure. It's been shown time and time again in loads and loads of industries. And if you don't prepare your organisation for this, if you don't do the steps, then again, you'll jump too far and you won't succeed. That's not to say you can't be very radical and innovative, but you've got to have the things in place, and you've definitely got to treat every project as a business project. I always get a real sense of depression when people say to me, we're going to implement this new IT system, it's going to transform the company. No, it's not. You transform the company, and that's how you're able to use the new IT system.
Thank you. We can probably fit in one more question before I sum up. Anyone wants to get the last question in? Yes, in the middle towards the back.
Hi there, Chris Bridges-Taylor from BNR. Picking up on the business transformation, any hints on how you can tell what's going to happen with the behaviour of your customer and how they're going to make decisions, and then when your customer disappears because they haven't got it right, where you're going to find your new markets?
Good question. Who likes to tackle that?
I'll start with that then. Okay, so I think the risk of your customer not getting right and losing your, through no fault of your own, losing your market is could be a real one. I think trying to map not just what's happening a step up and above, above you and below you in your supply chains, but what's happening at a market level is really important. So I talked earlier about the kind of two-speed approach, is looking at what you can do within your factory with the technology, within your company, to improve your current performance, but there needs to be some sort of scanning of what's happening within your sector, where you think that disruption could come from. So I suppose the answer is just be alert and look for the trends, and also just try and diversify if by improving your own performance, having more, becoming more digitized potentially could create new opportunities by being more agile, new market shares, looking for new market opportunities so you're less exposed to a particular Uber effect in the one market where you currently sit.
Yeah, I think it's very much having antennae, isn't it? And you've got to know what's going on. And the good news is that's so easy these days, because the information's out there on the web. You can go looking for this stuff, and then start to maybe think ahead and model a bit. So what would happen if that changed? I think there are a number of trends you can spot in this. I mean, the servitization, as you put it, Sam, is a big one. That's going to happen to every industry. So if your customer doesn't get it, maybe you've got to help educate them around that kind of concept, or go looking for the people who may disrupt them and establish those kind of relationships. But I mean, the good news is it's very easy to find stuff out these days.
Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, I mean, what we usually recommend is to say, depends on where you are in your supply chain, but you should really try to understand where your product, where the end product is, and think from there what happens in the market. And sometimes you can try to, bypass your customer. That sometimes it doesn't work, it's very dangerous, but at least I agree, to understand the whole picture and to see where technology is going, I think is key, because otherwise you can really overnight you wake up and, as you said, your customer is gone. But there is, again, I think, a chance, if you understand what's happening 1 or 2 levels above, you have a better chance to be prepared. Yeah, and sometimes you should definitely try to talk to the people who use your component to understand which way it's going. But that's unfortunately, or maybe the only thing you can really do.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for such great questions, and could you join me again in thanking the excellent panel for their speeches and answers. So I'm going to quickly try and sum up what has been a fairly packed day. We started by describing Industry 4.0 as the coming together of humans and technology, and quite a few themes have come out during the day, and of course we have tomorrow as well. Partnerships and collaboration across the supply chain has been throughout the day, including interoperability and standards, and then some very human issues around people, diversity and skills as key drivers for success. Big data, obviously, in action, really key for simulation, for operation, and that includes things like virtual reality, augmented reality, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and there seems to be a whole world of probably new opportunities around data and turning data into wisdom. Cybersecurity, of course, has cropped up from everyone as a key challenge, and also I think it was Julian that kind of said it could be a complete blocker. It's really important to get that right, as well as being trusted. But the positives, the potential for incredible productivity gains, words like disruption and innovation flying around. And so I thought it was nicely summed up this morning by Lord Pryor, actually, when he quoted that digital technology is doing for human brain power what steam did for muscle power. So I think that's a positive way to end the day. So thank you very much for sticking with us today. It's been a really interesting day. I've very much enjoyed it. There is still time for you to get round the exhibition, but there's also drinks at 5, networking drinks at 5 here in this venue. So please, you're all invited to that. Please do join that. And otherwise, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow again here at 9:30. So thank you very much.